Welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, good people, I am in airplane mode. And now, a man who remembers when breaking news may have been about breakdancing. A man who needs no introduction. How you doing today?
I'm all right, Pocket Locker. Good to see you again. Hello, audience. How are you
Hello,
doing today?
everyone. I'm all right. I'm all right.
Good.
Yeah, it's just interesting one. There's a lot. There's a lot in the news. What's going on, y'all? So, did we miss something? Did something happen?
There
Everybody
was a
buzzing or
school shooting.
something? Yeah, right.
There's another school
There was
shooting.
there was a school shooting and another
In
school
fact,
shooting.
there were two school
Yeah,
shootings.
yeah, at least.
Sadly, this is an ongoing issue in the United States.
At least. So yeah, there's just a ton going on. My take on all of this is not gonna be what others' take is on this. That's for sure. Um,
Hmm.
you know, I I I feel like we've lost the plot, and a lot of what I've heard has really bugged me. I mean, obviously, um, I don't have any. I don't have any real love or respect or concern um for Charlie Kirk. Um, but I feel like a lot of what I've seen in the response has been incredibly problematic. Um, First off, like I just don't understand. I've seen a lot on the left. I've seen a lot from liberals that to me does not seem to understand just how antagonistic the right is to the left. Like immediately we saw after this man was murdered, we saw like an immediate rush to war. Like an
Hmm.
immediate rush to judgment that the left was responsible, that the white men fight back, all that type of stuff. HBCUs had to go on lockdown. Why are HBCUs on lockdown when black people have had absolutely nothing to do with
Nothing.
this? It shows me that the right is always going to use whatever happens, good for them, bad for them, right, wrong, or indifference, to go after their enemies, who are clearly, black people, brown people, LGBTQ people, and the left. And the amount of people I've seen on the left, the amount of so-called progressives, so-called leftists that were thrown under that bus, like when this happened and the right immediately wants to go to war, they wanted to take y'all about. They were ready to go into full on purge mode. Full on purge mode. And I don't understand how people on the left don't understand how much they were thrown under the bus as a part of that.
It's important to note here, Pocket Locker, that the two people we that were publicized a lot for trying to assassinate Donald Trump were his former supporters. This guy who did the Kirk assassination was from a MAGA family. I don't personally know what his thoughts about the Trump movement were. I don't know, but clearly he had an issue with things or something that Charlie Kirk did or said at some point. Uh, what I do wonder, just to sort of circle back to what you're saying, if people on the right who are in charge are trying to solidify their hold on many of their adherents by saying the other side is bad, vilifying everyone on the other side, instead of being rational and saying, let's find the person or people who orchestrated this and let's focus on getting them punished, right? Let's be even handed about this. There's no desire to be even handed uh, in the halls of power because they want control. And I think they want control over everybody, not just their adherents. So how do you do that? You keep scaring people and you keep letting people know, hey, you have an enemy who's a constant threat, and it turns out it's going to be the person next door where you can't even trust them. So you learn to rely on the people who are essentially abusing you for all your information, and what you consider to be truth is what they say, not what actually transpired. This is a highly effective method because people don't want to. They just they want they want to keep their insecurity because it makes them feel alive. It can make them feel validated, and all the stuff they're wrong about that they've been shown again and again. You were wrong about this. You were wrong about this. They don't have to deal with it. It gives them another place to hide for a little bit longer before they have to realize and say, I was fooled. I was wrong. And now I have to change. Bunch of people on the left aren't bad. I had this conversation to some degree with my brother and one of my brothers, and we were supposed to hang out yesterday, but he got sick. So I was hoping we would turn the conversation towards this because I said some things to him about this incident and my thoughts and feelings on it, and that Charlie Kirk is not someone who should be lionized at this moment for his positions, and that Charlie Kirk said racist things again and again, and blah blah blah. And I go on. Charlie Kirk was very unchristian, and I cited Bible verses, and he says, "Well, I don't agree." And I don't know if he would have brought it up during
Wait,
lunch.
didn't agree with what? He didn't agree that he wasn't Christian?
Yeah, I think that's it. But I don't know for sure because he wasn't,
But
he
that's
didn't, he didn't, well, let me just say, he didn't go back to my arguments and cite specific things I said for him to disagree with. He just said he didn't agree.
I would say, well, yeah, okay. I would first off, I would just say that sounds like a again, it sounds like about what I expect dealing with religious family members. And my thing is, you know, that's an emotional shutdown tactic. That's it's almost like having a conversation with yourself because that's what they get to. They get to the, well, I disagree, but they don't really want to take it any further because there's been nothing you've probably said that they can actually disagree with. It's just I disagree, and then the idea is to move on so that we don't have to get into the specifics of the disagreement because their side won't hold up. But what I will say is this: a lot of these Christians have told on themselves because that's another huge part of this. Is, to me, this has just been a perfect example of Jesus is the avatar for white supremacy because everybody has just been hiding behind the fact that he was Christian. Oh, he was a man of God. Oh, he was a Christian. Da, 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 da. And it just shows you that this is what Christianity is to them. Christianity is defending racism. Christianity is defending bigotry. Christianity is supporting Trump. Christianity is supporting mass deportation. It is all of those things. And as soon as this really bad person dies, they can't instead of everybody universally saying, "Man, that dude said he was a Christian, but we don't, that's everybody runs to his defense. Oh no, this how could this happen to a man of God? Because to them that is what a man of God is. And so I think a lot of people would disagree with the stating that what he was doing wasn't very Christian, because the truth is they know that that's exactly what they expect from Christians, that is exactly prototypical on the nose Christian behavior.
But this
So
is your,
absolutely, hang on. Go ahead, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, this is your, sorry to interrupt. This is your point again and again, how you have a very low bar set for Christians. And for you, when you hear that Christians, someone is a Christian, you lower your expectations. You
Immediately.
know, immediately you lower your expectations.
Yeah, because look, it's
So
the same. I heard this recently said. Maybe it was Jovan or something. And I've had problems with his takes on Charlie Kirk, but when he was talking about this, he said basically, I understand women who mistrust men until it's demonstrated that they're safe around them. I understand trans people who mistrust cis people until you know that they're trustworthy and are not going to harm you. Um, he said I understand as a black person distrusting white people until they show that they are allies and not going to harm you. Um, that's exactly how I feel about believers. Yeah, I'm an atheist. I have when somebody tells me they're Christian, I'm immediately uh on edge until they can show me that they're human, that their Christianity has not in fact um compromised their humanity to the point that they are not a danger to somebody like me. And if I'm being really honest, which is it's amazing that I have to work so hard to carve out a space for sincerity even on my own YouTube channel. It's just that hard to be honest in the moment. To be honest, no Christians ever met that burden. No Christians ever met that burden. Every single supposedly sincere believer I've ever met in my life has, in fact, compromised their humanity to the point that it is a harm to me, people like me, people I care about, people I love, or the wider society in general. Because you can't believe that silly stuff and not have it affect your behavior in silly ways. And this is one of those ways. One of those ways is you have somebody who is clearly a hateful bigot. Clearly somebody who is a grifter, who has taken advantage of Christianity to the tune of money, power, fame, influence, all of that stuff, riding on the back of hatred. The man dies, and all of a sudden he's on Air Force Two. They want to make him a saint. They want to carry on his legacy. It's gonna serve as a boost to his organization. They weren't even gonna go out to Turning Point USA events, but now they're gonna go out to Turning Point USA events. They're weeping because he was a man of God. So again, they're telling on themselves. They are showing this is exactly why I lower my expectations for Christians,
yeah, well,
because when the bad guy dies, y'all want to make him a saint. I don't understand. It's so predictable at this point.
Charlie Kirk said something along the lines that empathy is a new age made up word. So the outpouring of empathy in his own eyes, I'm sure he would appreciate it, right? But he said he thought it was a bad thing to see the number of people who most of whom he did, almost none of whom he knew, right? He A human being knows relatively few people. in the face of humanity, and he's no different.
I don't
Um,
even know that he would. I mean, honestly, I think these people are so I mean, he was really against empathy. I think if anything, if he did anything, it would be the performative, sort of demanding empathy from the left, but not returning any.
oh
Um,
yeah.
and that's been the thing. Like, let's flip the story. I always say, random unknown YouTuber, Jay Bundy gets shot at a campus, defending secular humanist values or whatever. Um, how many tears would Charlie Kirk shed for me and my family? Well, I've got exactly the same energy and allotment of tears for him, which is somewhere between 0 and 0. Um, so that whole thing has been crazy to me. Another thing that I've seen on the left is this performative, sort of perfunctory denouncement of political violence and murder. Um, and again, I think I get where people are coming from, but I don't think they realize just how much they are adopting the framing of the other side when they do this. First off, we're grown adults, and it shows you that we're not serious about our political discourse when people feel the need to go live and go in public and denounce murder. It shows you that the other side has said, "Oh, you're celebrating somebody's death. You're calling for political violence. You're calling for no," and they've been openly calling for political violence
Hmm.
the whole time,
The whole time.
celebrating people's murders in our faces for years. Now, one of their people gets taken out, who is quite frankly completely fucking irrelevant to me. And now all of a sudden, everybody on our side is supposed to get on our knees and grovel and talk about how much we denounce murder and political violence. You're like I would. I'm not gonna indulge in that. Why? Because I'm a grown ass man. And if we are gonna have a serious conversation about politics or society or whatever, it's beneath me to have to explain to you that I don't support murder and that I don't think a long range rifle is the best way to solve our political discourse. So, it's been sort of like I get why people do it, but realize that when you do it, you're playing exactly into their hand. You're defending yourself against the accusation that you actually support, encourage, and cheerlead for assassinations, rather than saying you're a fucking idiot, and clearly that's not what is happening here. And that's a sidestep. The reason that's so important is because again, it's a distraction. It's a sidestep of the real issues of taking on head on what are concerns about people like Charlie Kirk um, actually are. Uh,
Hmm.
the other thing is it humanizes him, and it's the same thing I feel about the response about his family. Do I again? What does it say about your discourse with the quote unquote other side when you actually feel the need to say in English words on a broadcast, well, I really don't think any child deserves to have their parent executed in front of them. Congratulations. What are you going to tell me next? 2 plus 2 is 4, and we should ideally not steal things. Everybody should pay the taxes, and you should stop when you see a red light.
Well, hey, let's have a look at that. So that means it shouldn't happen in Iran. It shouldn't happen in Gaza. It shouldn't happen in Washington, D.C.
There you
It
go.
shouldn't happen in Syria. It shouldn't happen in Israel, elsewhere in Israel. Shouldn't happen
Shouldn't
in
happen at
Africa.
Alligator Alcatraz.
Exactly. We can agree. So if it's true, it might be absolutely true. And to sort of partition off sections of the world where you don't care is the wrong thing to do. It shows that, hey, there's some selfishness at work where this person wants all the benefits, but they still want to have the absolute freedom to control other people. Like you don't get to do that, buddy. That's not okay. And why? Here's what blows my mind. Why would you want it?
Right.
Why would you want it? One of my favorite quotes ever, um, is, and I'm gonna botch it a little, perhaps, is a Rumi quote where the poet Rumi asks, "Which is better, to rule over 5,000 men or to be free?" I think people who pull up that take up that mantle of ruling over anyone or wanting to immediately give up their freedom to some degree, and they hate it eventually. I think a lot of them, they hate it. And so all they do is double down, triple down, and some even, and I think I see this a lot in the church, they will act out in a way that gets them thrown out because they don't just know how to step down on their own. I just can't walk away, so let me get somebody to push me out.
Yeah. Um, there's so much here. So let me say a couple things about that while we're on the topic. It really
Mhm.
does just tell on people's selves, and I've even seen, one of the people I'm the most upset about in this whole thing is actually my former mentor at Penn State who teaches the sociology of race. I had to call the fam, I had to call the crew into our new virtual headquarters work adventure because I was like, y'all got to watch this with me because even the way he addressed this with his class was so apologetic for Charlie Kirk that I felt like he was being irresponsible to his students, especially in a class. It's called the sociology of race. You should be thinking about race critically. Um, it was a real problem. But what it says to me is that it humanizes this white bigot so much more than anybody else. Because again, why is his death the impetus for the conversation about political violence, but not all these other things? Why is his death a call for empathy for families and children and all this other? When that man himself said he believed people needed to be executed in public and that children needed to see it. Those are his words, not mine. His.
Well, it happened. I stated Charlie Kirk won the argument.
Yeah, according
He
to
won.
him.
According to him, he won the argument. Um, Possibly in a very destructive, well, clearly in a very destructive way. And who benefited? That's the thing the shooter needs to be asked. Like, who benefits from this?
The only thing that
People get
needed to be asked, and I don't know if anybody has it, I haven't seen it, but the only thing missing from the Charlie Kirk reel, because we have everything on tape with this guy, the only thing missing to me is somebody asking him flat out. And so when you say this, Charlie Kirk, about we need some deaths to, maintain our other God-given rights. We need some gun deaths. Would you yourself be willing to be
would you
the victim
volunteer?
of gun violence, so that we can maintain our other God-given rights? I haven't seen that clip. That's the only
If if
apropos thing
if
missing.
if he'd have said that, he would be dead. He would have been dead sooner. Because there are people, sadly, who would
But
have
I think he
taken
would
that.
have said
And
yes.
I would hope not.
You don't think he would have said yes? I
I
think he was
don't
that
know.
committed to I think he was that
I,
committed to the bit. I think he definitely said
I
yes.
well, see, you said committed to the bit, not that's his actual conviction as a human being, as opposed to his actual conviction as a grifter. You know what he must say as a grifter. He has to,
Yeah, because I
pardon
think
the
he
expression, stick to his guns or stick to other
yes.
people's guns, whatever.
Yes, because I
That's
think
the MO.
yeah, I think he had one of those push comes to shove moments when it came to like his, I don't know, rape apologetics or whatever, like the whole, would you actually want your daughter in whatever situation. I think it was an abortion thing, right? I think it was your daughter gets R-worded. Do you really want her to have to whatever? And I think when push came to shove, he tried to hold down the fort and ultimately say that he would,
Yeah, she's gonna have
he,
that child. I
yeah, that
Googled
he
it.
would
Those are
go
his
with that.
exact words. Yeah,
Yeah.
and which I think is disgusting. But
But
that
that's my
is,
indication that he sticks to the bit, right? That's
you know, you wouldn't be wrong. You wouldn't be wrong.
yeah. But to your point, we
Gonna
don't
be
know. I'm just saying that's
absolutist.
what I'm going off of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're in a unique situation where, as you stated, there's a lot of footage of Charlie Kirk. Uh, just like Trump, we can let him speak for himself, especially the stuff that a large portion of the population wouldn't like hearing. Well, he's gone and said it. You can access recordings. If my brother were to bring that up, I'm like, would you like to hear a recording of him saying that, complete with video? It's not
Right.
AI. Might be something for 3 or 4 years ago. It's not AI making it. We don't need AI to falsify things about Charlie Kirk.
Exactly. My one black friend, give
We
me
don't.
one sec. I want to try to refresh to
Sure.
see if I can bring the chat back up.
Okay.
All right, I'm back. I don't know if it'll work. It's just that I can see the chat on the stream, but on my restream it like froze. All right. So, but yeah, appreciate y'all. Chat's going in. Appreciate everybody for being here. I see
Yeah. Thank
PC
you.
and Ryan and Trees and Vic Lit and Kyle and AR and Randy. Um, yeah, it's good to see everybody here. Good to see everybody. Ember's in the house. Appreciate you. Um, all right, so that's another thing. Okay, now back to this thing about humanizing these children's. Um, Again, why do we have that conversation about him? And here's what came to me: a lot of these people, even on the left, y'all, even on the left, what I would say is honestly, I would say y'all showed more concern about Charlie Kirk's children having to watch their father get shot than you show for actual children getting
Who
shot
got
at.
shot? Hmm.
Like they are the shooting victims themselves. We don't talk about them at all. But we got all of this concern for the white man's child seeing him get shot. Do y'all have to understand that that is how people really feel? That is what we're seeing. That is what your behavior is showing us. That is what your priorities seem to be. And this is what I mean when I say all of this has been people telling on themselves. So that's been the thing. And then the thing with the wife, and again, I get it. It's the wife, and how much do we bring the spouses into the thing? I gotta say, I'm a person who thinks spousal critique in some situations is appropriate. First off, it just depends on what it is. If it's sausage and pepperoni is clearly the best thing for your pizza. Somebody else says, no, I'm gonna hit it with like the boiled chicken in the sardines. Yes, that's a terrible opinion, and you're probably a bad person. But your spouse and your children don't need to be brought into this. I'm sorry if you're Melania and you are getting rich and filthy off that Trump bank account and spread your legs for that man. Like, yeah, you absolutely have a culpability in the downfall of humanity. And yeah, most of us are going to be like, fuck Melania. Um, and for all those people who were so quick to, oh, they feel so bad and they're crying tears and the leftists are sending flowers to Charlie Kirk's widow and all this. Guess what? She got up like a day or two later, made a press release. It was like, I'm gonna carry on his legacy, and things are about to go further and faster and harder than ever because she wants to keep that Turning Point USA money rolling in. So again, like. Y'all had all that sympathy, compassion, and she woke up the next day, chose violence, and decided to put her foot right back on our necks. So what are we doing? What are we doing?
I didn't see. I saw that she was involved in a press conference. I didn't hear her remarks. Um, Obviously, you know, what happened is unfortunate. She has two children that she's obligated to raise and take care of, and no doubt she can do a fine job. She's got the wherewithal to do a fine job. If they need therapy, she can afford it. If she needs therapy, she can afford it, and that sort of thing. So they can access people to help them deal with what has gone on, and you know, eventually, they'll have enough peace that they can begin to enjoy their lives again. I hope, because not everybody is capable of that. Some people take it so hard they never recover enough to enjoy life again.
Did I leave out
So,
Kyle earlier? I didn't think. I thought I mentioned you, Kyle. I'm sorry. I see Kyle. I know Kyle's here, and Ryan's here. Appreciate you, Ryan. Um, yeah. So you know, to me, it just shows she's not a great person. Okay, and do I have some, you know, again, you know, I look, I didn't do it, y'all. I didn't do it. I didn't ask anybody to do it. I didn't encourage anybody to do it. So you know. But my point is just to say, like, okay, like y'all could have all the empathy for her you want to, but again, she's carrying on the fight. So to me, she was just as bad as he is, and you know, she's about to show people that. And so again, I'm not gonna lose a whole lot of sleep over her because again, she's carrying on his mission of hatred. But look, y'all, let's jump into the main event because I did title the stream why Charlie Kirk should be alive. And I said in the thumbnail, it's not what you think. And that's sincere because I've heard a lot of Charlie Kirk should still be alive take everything from, you know, this is not how we settle our problems, and you know, I wanted him to have restorative justice, or I wanted to change his mind, all of this blah. That is not my take. My take is actually something I think a little bit more critical. Charlie Kirk should still be alive because Charlie Kirk should have never been on that campus to begin with. Basically what I have not heard anybody talk about that is especially troubling to me as an educator is hate speech is not part of education. Hate speech does not need to be protected and given a forum in American universities, especially not public universities. Matter of fact, hate speech is illegal. It is a crime, and it is also against university policies. And you certainly could not flip the script. You certainly could not have the same rhetoric that these people have about white people, about white Christians, about all of that stuff, and get away with it on the other side. So there's of course this constant asymmetry in our practices. We might put certain policies and procedures on the books, but when it comes to how we practice it, it's totally different. And how it always ends up going is when it comes from the left, or when it comes from marginalized people, when it comes from women, when it comes from black people, brown people, immigrants, atheists, all that type of stuff, religious minorities, it's always hate speech. It's always hate speech. If a Muslim group got up there, a group of brown Muslim students, and just talked about how Christianity is dog shit, how they're just so sick of it. You know, if a bunch of LGBT, again, we always have to be so careful when we do a pride event, when we do a Black Lives Matter event, when we do a NAACP chapter on campus, when we do a Black History Month, when we do any of these things on campus, we have to be so careful, right? And what do our events do? Our events stay in the lane squarely of advocacy for self. They stay in the lane of, we're here to talk about Black history. We're here to talk about, what it's like to be a Black student at this university. We're here to address the challenges that we see in this institution and what we think it needs to do better to serve Black students. And we have to stay there. We're not allowed to venture off into, well, let's talk about how shitty all our white brethren are. Let's talk about all that, because if you did that, all of a sudden it would be seen as discrimination, it would be seen as hate speech, and they would shut you down. Matter of fact, they might shut you down anyway. No, please notice, even us, when we went to Kentucky recently, had our little protest, we was out there, had a little public area where we were, had called the police, got the permits, did all the right things, and we're there to protest the art. Please notice that did not stop these people from coming up to us, harassing us, yelling at us, screaming at us, cursing at us. Okay, and it also did not stop them people. Yeah, and it also did not stop them people from calling the police on us. Okay, and again, we're in a public space with a permit, so it just goes to show you this asymmetry, because if a marginalized group did that on campus, it would not be tolerated. However, when they do it, it's dialogue, it's discourse, and I just don't understand, where are the educators at? Where are the people at that university getting in the room and saying, we run a goddamn school here? This is an educational institution. And we have, first off, I think, a legal obligation. I think an obligation in terms of school policy. And I believe even more so than that, a moral and ethical obligation to protect and serve the interest of our students, particularly our marginalized students, that we do not allow hate speech and groups notoriously involved for it on this campus. And let me be very clear about what the mechanisms needed to be. Number one, that application should have never been approved. When you have an event like that at a university, you are supposed to, first off, it needs to be run by a student group. So, matter of fact, if you are like some outside organization, you have to then negotiate your events directly with the university itself, because really the only people that are allowed to just reserve space and hold events on campus are like classes, in registered clubs. So you have to start to ask your questions of like, who reserved that space and who registered that event and who approved it? Because when students do it, or if the university itself does it, you have to ask all them questions have to be addressed. What is the event for? Who's running the event? How many people do you expect to be here? What is the purpose? Okay. And so to me, once you figure out, oh, this is a Turning Point USA thing, what are they into? What do they stand for? Oh yeah, hell no. We can't. Sorry, y'all can't really be up in here. We don't do stuff like that. And if a student group did it and, lied to you or fudged it, because a lot of these groups, they'll do that, right? So you do have college Republicans, you do have, conservative interest sort of groups or Christian groups on campus and stuff like that. And they all have, every right to be there. They're fine. They're not doing anything wrong. And they are allowed to rent out spaces and host events and stuff like that. And if they file and they say like, oh, we're just going to be having some, conservative political talk. We're going to have some conservative influencers, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's all fine. And yeah, go ahead. You approve it. Why? Because they didn't say in their thing, yeah, we're going to be tearing down gay people. Yeah, we're inviting a bunch of racists. All right. So they don't say that. So they just say, hey, we're doing, conservative advocacy or whatever they do. But again, somebody's supposed to be in the room, somebody's supposed to be there. And once you realize organizations are doing stuff like this and you start checking off, the list in terms of, them speaking out against marginalized groups, now there has to be consequences. Now, first off, that organization is no longer welcome on this campus. Any student group saying that they're bringing them back, they're not allowed to come back. And you might do something like suspend that group for a year or revoke their ability to have events like that for a certain period of time. But we don't have that culture of accountability in our universities anymore. Instead, we have exactly the opposite, which is the administration, the university, and now even the educators and teachers themselves insisting that that type of dialogue needs to be hosted on universities, and insisting that students engage in debate with people like this, and insisting that that is somehow a part of their education. And I think they are entirely wrong. And so that is why I think Charlie Kirk should still be alive today, because he should have never been allowed to be there in the first place. What do you think of that, my one black friend?
First of all, you might want to let people know, because we'll have new viewers, that what your qualifications are as far as the university environment.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I'm a PhD. I'm currently I'm a this is what I do. I teach at a university.
there you
I'm
go.
a biologist, but I'm currently teaching sociology and cultural anthropology.
Okay, so thank you for that. In a way, it's like during a debate or on the news when someone says something knowingly false, and then it gets corrected, it gets fact checked. Um, the damage is done because I'm going to paraphrase Lauryn Hill. Even after all my knowledge and my theories, I add a effer so you ignorant people hear me. Um, the corrections often fall on angry deaf ears, but the lie doesn't. The lie is swallowed whole, and the person integrates that into their psyche, and it ends up coming out of their mouth at least or at most a few days later. They'll keep repeating it. We see this in Christian apologists, right? Frank Turek has been corrected. He keeps repeating the lies. William Lane Craig has been
Right,
corrected.
right,
He keeps repeating the
right.
lies. Ken Ham, corrected, keeps repeating the lies. Why? The lies are what they have in modern political discourse. I don't care which side you're on, you got to think about that. Is this person lying to me? Um, I need to make the time to verify what I'm being told. If you're having a conversation about politics and I've made this mistake and you are correcting someone, show them. Show them. In fact, I've heard this said about atheism when we're talking to Christians. Have them look it up in front of you right then and there. Have them look it up. If they disagree with you and you
Yeah,
know you have the facts, have them look
yeah,
it up on the spot. And it's okay to get a, well, I can't agree with that. It's okay to, well, to hear, well, I need to look into this more. It's okay to hear, well, that's not what I believe. I have spoken about Father Tom, who I would have, sometimes he and I would go to the same place for Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner. How when he heard me use criticism of his, the God of the Bible, and he would say in a way that was non-threatening, it was non-judgmental. He would say, the God I believe in isn't like that, right? He is saving God in that respect. We may hear in these arguments when they are political, well, the so and so, whoever, right, that I believe in isn't that way. We have a responsibility, we as in everyone, of saying, are you willing to look into it more? And if you have the time, make sure they do. Make sure they do. It blows my mind when I tell people like you hold. He's at casinos. Casino. The house wins. We hear that. The house wins. Well, he's gone bankrupt multiple times. Is he mismanaging something? We can go on and on and on about his criminal past. Someone put it to me that this woman with the Fed, who the news is she misstated something on a credit application for something, and she ought to be thrown out for that. I'm like, well, let's apply that principle. If you agree with that principle, can we then apply it to Donald Trump? Well, no. Well, why not? Why not? Because a lot of people, and we see this in when we talk to people who have faith in a God, faith in this or that political person, this or that political party, they tend to believe those people are infallible. And it's just not true. The God of the Bible is one of the most fallible characters in all of fiction. He just is. And saying that he's almighty and he has all this power and he's awesome, that's fine for you to believe. People can say the same thing about Charlie Kirk. That's fine for you to believe, but you should investigate it to see if it's actually worth believing. Because if it's not, if you will not investigate, you have proven to me that your opinion is of no value other than to help you sleep at night,
So this
other
is
than to help you keep the illusion going.
this is what gets me back to Jesus as the avatar for white supremacy. Before I say that, I think the
The
idea of
brown
having,
guy, right?
huh?
The
Y-
brown Middle Eastern guy
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the is
exactly.
the avatar for what?
Um,
Okay.
the I think it's a really good idea to force people to look things up right in front of you, because they're always bluffing about their interest in the truth. And if you let them, they'll escape, and then people just avoid it. This is I've had these conversations with friends and families, and they never really will look into things the way they need to. If they do, they will almost certainly do so in a way that is incompetent. I don't say that to be insulting. It's just how the cognitive dissonance functions, right? They'll tell you they'll be very capable, but if you challenge them on something, all of a sudden, when they get back home, their critical thinking and their research skills will sort of fail them strategically.
Because something
So
good is on television, yeah.
yeah, exactly. That, or they look into it, but they went to the Christian bookstore, or they only found the apologist, and at some level they know they should really be looking at this from a neutral perspective or seeing what the other side has to say. But again, the cognitive dissonance is stopping them from doing that. To be clear, but what you're really talking about gets to, there's always been this asymmetry. And this is what a lot of universities have to deal with. The truth is, a lot of these universities, especially big state schools, they are in these communities and states and places where there's a lot of conservative influence. There's a lot of conservative students. There's a lot of conservative community. There's a lot of conservative power in those states, even in a state like Pennsylvania. Um, and what they are doing effectively is basically saying, well, if we have to let, one side or whatever, or we have to let, we have to let students express their views. We have to let students, have their organizations and do their sort of things. And so then they start doing that false equivalence thing. Well, if we have to let the college Democrats organize an event, then we have to let the college Republicans you know, organize an event. And so then what they end up doing is basically endorsing the right wing framing of what's going on in our times, and they're not the same. Like that's the same thing. Society needs to come and realize, like, if because here's what would really here's how this really plays out. It's like, if you're, a leftist group or a progressive organization, you're going to have your meetings and you're going to talk about the things you want to talk about, and you can do that without veering into hate speech. But if you're some conservative Christian group or the college Republicans, then when you're told, okay, go ahead and have your meeting and have your events, but every time you veer off into anti-LGBTQ rhetoric or racist propaganda, or your support of mass deportation or your support of the genocide in Gaza, like, yeah, that shit would get you in trouble. That shit would get you shut down. And then of course that's what they use for their persecution complex. Well, you're not letting us express our opinions, whatever they are, our religious opinions, our political opinions. Okay. And then you have to accept that most of them represent the status quo. They represent the enfranchised group. They represent the people in power. And that is another thing that has been missing from this narrative, especially motherfuckers on the left. Part of the message in this shit needs to be, sorry, when you make yourself an enemy of humanity, when you make yourself a committed danger to others, the rest of the world does not owe you. We do not owe you holding space for your radical transformation. If I broke into my one black friend's house right now and put a weapon to his head, and somebody saw me going in and they called the police, and the police came in and I had a knife to this man's throat, and they just take me up out of here, right? People are going to say they took him up out of here. He was a threat to somebody else's life. He seemed like he was intent on hurting the people, so the police protected that person. Nobody will say, well, he might have changed his mind, or what if he had a principled reformation at the very last moment? Like, that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, but that's the same thing that's happened with a lot of these right wingers. Like, they've made themselves committed to being a threat and a danger to others. And so to me, the only educated sociological response to all this is to understand and to teach your students, this is how reality fucking works. And in reality, you don't just get to disregard the humanity of others perpetually and expect them not to do anything about it. And, like, I'm sorry, but, like, everybody doesn't owe you trying to get through to you. At some point, you're sitting on some bullshit. You're a danger to others. We've tried to have this conversation with you. You refuse to take in new information and change. Okay, we now have you categorized over here as a threat, and our new priority is simply protecting people from you. Your reformation, your change is no longer our concern. The other thing is, it is putting universities are supposed to be ahead of the curve in terms of understanding what is happening in society and educating in a way that allows your students to stay ahead of the curve. And instead, what I'm seeing is the opposite. What do I mean by that, y'all? If you think about what is going on in our social landscape, our political landscape, and even our media, politically, we're actually coming to a realization, in a sense, that we're beyond the debate, we're beyond the discourse, right? Think about everything that's been happening in recent months with, say, Jubilee, right? From like their Sam Cedar episode through their Mehdi Hassan episode and all those things, right? So even now in sort of the mainstream political discourse, we're saying, hey man, maybe that debate stuff, I don't really know if that's going anywhere. Because I mean, essentially, dude, you just sat down with a whole bunch of open fascists who were seal clapping at being called Nazis and telling you, to get out of this country. Yeah, I think they're too far gone. I don't even right. And then even in online spaces, people are going, yeah, I don't really think we necessarily should be engaging in these debates anymore. Like this whole debate culture is just kind of toxic, hasn't really gone anywhere. So the world is kind of realizing these debates are futile, they're not sincere. But then you have the university acting like they stuck 20 years ago, like they can't read the room. And then they're saying the exact opposite. Oh no, we need to have these people here. Students should be talking to them. You should be engaged in debates. Like, sorry, again, that's an incredibly uneducated take. The only educated take would be this man has made a living and built up this huge organization off of course, quote unquote, debates and discourse, but he never changes his mind about anything. So you want to show people that is not actual debate and discourse. Yeah, I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
Well, a lot of people, how do I say this? They've already picked a side and they can't defend any of it. They know what they like, and they may like this particular group or that particular group. The feeling that it gets them, the sense of belonging, not necessarily a sense of purpose. Because I think a lot of times most people who use a lot of political speech in day-to-day life or what they post on the social media, they don't know how to govern. They have no interest in it. They just like stirring the pot. They like the attention. One of my interlocutors on Facebook, I call him out on that. I'm like, most of these ideas aren't even yours. Like you barely have an idea. And he thinks he's a great thinker and all this stuff. Like you're not. Your insults come back at a third grade level at best. Your posts are filled. Even stuff he reposts has spelling errors in it. And I actually replied to one that came out this week. Like maybe instead of focusing on religion, they ought to focus more on spelling and grammar.
Damn.
Literally, what he reposted had multiple errors in. I'm like, if you didn't catch this, then either you aren't paying attention to what you're putting back out there, right? Recirculating, or you don't know. How come you're not smart enough to know? I had a friend, she said, Mope, you're a genius. Like, because we talk about different concepts and stuff like that. I worked for her. You're a genius. And I looked at her and I said, how come I'm not smart enough to know? She thought it was very clever, and to her, I proved her point. I'm no genius. I'm clever. It doesn't mean there's always a difference, but with me, I'm willing to say there is. Um, and a lot of these people don't even have that. They're just, as you would say in radio, ham radio, they're repeaters. They're just repeating the signal. They're not sending it. They don't know how. They're not capable of that. They're just repeating the signal and often hoping to win favor with others because of it. They don't know what to believe. They may not even know how to belong, but they know how to generate that feeling where they feel like they do. Shouting down the other side, um, making fun of the other side to promote what they believe, right? Um, and I wouldn't be me if I didn't call out Christians from the Bible itself. So I'm calling out these, you know, I'd say liberals and conservatives on something the Bible actually says. My iPad which is getting old, will cooperate. Colossians 3:3, for you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. Here's the part where we see in modern United States politics where they are utterly failing, where they on the news are utterly failing. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality. They elected a guy who's sexually immoral. Impurity. They elected someone who's impure. Lust. They elected someone who's multiple people who are lusty. Evil desires and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in your life, in the life you once lived, but now you must also rid yourself of all such things as anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Don't lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on your new self, which is renewed in the knowledge and image of its creator. Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. As an atheist, I can say this hasn't worked on a large scale in American politics. You cannot call this a Christian nation. That is utter horseshit. Utter horseshit. If this is what the Bible's telling me I should see, right? If this is the Bible telling me how Christians should be, it has failed. So why teach it in a school if it can't even work in your home? If it can't work in your society? If it's that poor, if it's that ineffective, I see good ideas here. I do. I can't agree with the Christ all in all part. I don't agree with that at all. I don't think Jesus was even real. But there's some good ideas here: to not cheat, to not lie, to not steal, to not be angry and rageful and vengeful. Fantastic.
I
That's
say we get rid of
good
it.
stuff.
You can't be a
I know
moral
you want
guide.
to. I know you
You
want to
can't
check
be a
it.
moral guide if you have
I know you want to check
immoral
it out. You just want to check
guidance.
it out.
You can't because
But,
I
but,
think we're doing
but,
there
but
where we're not help. Listen, you gotta really think about slow walking something, right? Like I think a lot of what we're doing as atheists, and it's just something to think about. I think we're authoring a lot of confusion. We're authoring a lot of confusion where we're
atheism is not
trying.
the author of confusion.
No, atheists are
I had to
authoring the
say that.
confusion. Atheists are authoring the confusion
Please explain.
because you're not people need you to be a grown man who's strong and can tell them what you really think and then have the courage of your convictions. So if it's the Bible is not true and there are many immoral things in the Bible,
There are.
the message needs to be this religion is not true, you need to leave it alone. It's very difficult for people to accept that and hear that and then us turn around and say, but I also think the Bible is really helpful and it could be like a really good tool and like there's some good stuff in it. I know what we're trying to do is be nuanced and we're trying to, be gentle and encourage people. Again, it lacks the moral clarity. I need to know, does this Bible get a thumbs up or a thumbs down? And to me, it's always got to be a thumbs down. First off, it's just not true. And then also, I don't think it's a good thing to do. Like, I think even in our own way, we're reinforcing the wrong message. We're still feeding into the idea that there are holy books, and we're feeding into the idea that the holy book should be a good guide for our behavior. And then we're going to people, now look, let me show you here how I actually want you to behave is really in your holy book telling you to do what I want you to do. That's not, I don't think, the answer. The real answer is, here's what we should be doing as people. I'm going to give you a human reason to do it. If you need to go into your Bible to find a biblical reason to do that, that's on you as a believer, but I'm not going to do that as an atheist because it just, to me, is too confusing. And then it also doesn't help us. We, w- at least for me, we got to think about what is the world we want to live in. Me, it's very clear. I do not want to live under religious tyranny. I'm sick of it. And black people deserve the truth. So you cannot give me anything from this Christianity that's going to serve me, because it's not true. And I don't want to build a future based on lies. So my goal
Mm.
is, let's get there as soon as possible. And what would really help is if all the people who knew that that stuff was not true would help convince the people who still believe it that it's not true. That helps us get to where we're going a lot faster. The way we're currently going about it, we're just getting ourselves like a slightly nicer Christianity, like okay, let's focus on the biblical passages we like. Like, to me, that is going to slow us down.
Hmm.
So that's what I mean when I say atheists are the authors of confusion. We're the victims here. We need to tell them people about our victimhood. We need to talk about how they lied to us, how they abused us, how we still can't get our families out of this stuff. We need to tell people how, like you said, like, look this stuff up. Like, we should be telling people,
Look it up.
look it up, like right now, like, because again, there's certain things, like the earth is old, like we evolved, like we know
It's
where
very
planets
old.
come from. A lot
Yeah.
of this stuff, I hate to say it, but like, sincere believers, they're not living in the same reality as the rest of us. And I no longer, I mean, to be honest, again, this is part of where I think these universities are going wrong. Even making these conversations about beliefs, making them about opinions, making them about political stances, often, again, it favors the other side. It's there's a great asymmetry here, because we're not really talking about differences of opinion. You know, the difference between tolerating people of different races versus tolerating racism. It's like, it's not just a difference of opinion. You got to actually, this is my problem with my sociology mentor. You got to actually make a determination, dude. Do you actually think racism is bad? Do you actually think racism is harmful? Do you actually think racism is acceptable? And now let me ask you the same thing about accepting other people. Do you think accepting other people is harmful? Do you think accepting other people is something that should be done? Because, you know, you got to have that moral clarity, because when you have that moral clarity, you say, I'm not about being a purist in terms of tolerance. I understand that for me, tolerance means it's important to tolerate and create equity for people that are marginalized. It does not mean I'm going to be tolerant of of racism. So it's a problem when people act like those things come down to opinion. And I think that that's largely the issue that created the climate for this whole Charlie Kirk situation, is that the real damage and pain that these people do to others is perpetually whitewashed every time it is deemed opinion, ideas, dialogue. Oh, he's a person who's out there. He's just sharing his views, and he's helping us all to have the conversation. Certain things don't have any certain things don't belong in the conversation. And that's how I really do feel about religion. It's like, look, a person who's a sincere, who's the person who's performing belief for me, right? That's we all do. We all perform. We're all what we show people. So if someone's showing me sincere belief, like you said, I lower my expectations immediately. I think they're
Mm.
one of two people. They're either a perpetuator, meaning there's somebody who, you know, they're using all this to their advantage. They're a grifter, they're an apologist, they're ministers, they're getting paid off of this. You know, they're manipulating other people. Or they're a victim, or they're one of the suckers. They're one of the marks. They're one of the deluded people that actually, right. And so I think a lot of times with atheists, we don't really mean to, but we sort of encourage people to be more suckers. And I think that actually, in a sense, makes us suckers. Because the truth is, like, that soft, lovey dovey, I love everybody, Jesus is here to help you, that's never been what Christianity really is. That's never been what it's really about. But what that does is that's a narrative everybody can get behind, and then that allows the bad people to go off and do what they really need to do. And here you have all these suckers, instead of just being like, okay, we need to leave this alone. They're all like, oh well, God is love and da 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 da. So, you know, to me, it's like, if you're a perpetrator, then I need to undercut your religion, because doing so is my direct way to undercut your power and your ability to manipulate others. But if you're a sucker, if you're a mark, then I really need to do that, because you didn't give your consent to this. You didn't consent to be brainwashed. You didn't consent to go along with this hatred. You didn't consent to be lied to. And so now it's like, out of concern for them, I don't want to encourage this thing. I want to let them know they've been lied to. So it's hard. It's like dealing with anybody in an abusive relationship. What do you do when you see the abuse, you see the harm, but the person doesn't want to leave? Like I don't know what you do in that case. I don't know what to do. And I get that that's where most of us are at. They just don't want to leave. But I think that's where we have to get to. And then we have to be honest with ourselves. And this is, again, back to this narrative. This is what was missing with the Charlie Kirk story. Some people are just unreachable. Some people they're just unreachable. They don't want to be convinced. Listen, most believers in your life at this stage of the game, if they're 35 plus, they're committed to dying in that faith. You got to really think about that, because they've thought about it, and they are committed mostly to dying in that faith. So, that's kind of what we're up against. But that's the problem, is a lot of them really think that it's all this lovey-dovey Jesus feel good stuff. But then when something like this happens, at the same time, they all have to rush to lionize Charlie Kirk as a man of God. And it's just like, what are we doing?
I think the man of God label is about as useful as the man of steel, useful and as truthful as the man of steel label. Um, there's Based on what I just read you, there's no way. There's no way. Maybe a man who thought he was a god, but man of God, no. I could go on. I know to some degree, Pocket Locker, it seems like maybe I'm like a carrion bird picking over the carcass of Christianity rather than drinking from, the golden cup of Christianity. And that's probably true. I'm picking over the carcass because I think to some degree there's some good things there, but ultimately it's something that has destroyed itself to a large degree by our science has destroyed it by revealing all these things about the world that the Bible got wrong,
Yeah,
by
and
revealing
also
things about
Christian
human nature and disease that the Bible got wrong.
and Christianity. Listen, Christianity's entire history, it's barbaric, it's monstrous. It is inextricably at this point tied to imperialism and colonial oppression and all of these things. Like I said, it's become the official religion of white supremacy. I those two things are forever intertwined. So, I think Christianity did this to themselves. They did it to themselves. They did it to themselves. So, what science really did was – ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... ... and understanding that they were wrong about everything. It sort of allowed us to see the world as it really is and how it really works. But in terms of just sort of the distaste for Christianity and stuff like that, I just think they did it to themselves. Because we people know now that they can do better without it. I mean, why are we
Some do.
constantly
Some do.
why are we constantly having this again? Like, why do we have to have conversations about prejudice against LGBTQ people? We only really have those conversations systematically with religious people, and they always go back to their religious justification. So people just see plainly that buying into that stuff and taking it seriously makes you worse. Why do we have to have conversations about the role of women in society or in the home or all this? I mean, these are just the most archaic conversations, but most people who really think that there's even something to talk about are conservative, and most of the time it's back to their religion that makes them think so rigidly about sex and gender. And most of us, again, we just know it's not true. Again, we know people evolve. We know the earth is old. Again, the only people who don't accept that are people who literally just think we were invented through magic by magical wizards. I don't care what your god
About
is.
about
Any
6,000 years
god
ago.
being that you think created the universe, that's magical wizardry. Like that's and again, that's grown people just don't think that. So to me, like, and again, there's no truth to it. So like I think that's the era we're at. And I honestly think we need to help religious people. And the way to help them is to stop soft pedaling it. It really is. Like there comes a time in everybody's life when you just have to say what it is. There always comes a time when the rubber meets the road and the hits. And listen, I get it. I'm gonna tell you something right now. There's no such thing as a nice way to do it. Okay? I'm gonna say something about language. And it's something I really feel is. And listen, I stand in solidarity with every marginalized group, but let me tell y'all something. Stop trying to make everything the N-word. There's the N-word is the N-word because it's the N-word, and that word has its own unique history. And what I see a lot of times people doing is they're trying to, okay, so there's a lot of terms and a lot of slurs and a lot of things, and we don't want to necessarily use those things, but stop trying to make everything the N-word. They're not the same. One thing I can talk about is the use of the R word. And that is something that a lot of people don't want to use anymore, and I'm cool with that. And again, thinking about it as a scholar, I don't control these things. You know what I mean? Like what's acceptable and what's not is not something I determine. But one of the things I've thought about that I realize is there's no safe way to say it. Right? You can't say the N-word, but you can call me a Black American. And some people don't like the term African American, but you can still use it. And for the most part, you won't offend somebody. They may correct you if they really care. They may say, hey, I'm a Black American or whatever. But that's like
Hmm.
it, right? You're not going to insult somebody by calling them those things, right? If you think about the R word, there's really no nice way for me to say you are not very intelligent or that what you're doing is not very intelligent. So first off, we have to distinguish, you know, hurling a slur at somebody with a disability. That would be considered, that's a problem for that specific reason versus our general use of language to describe a phenomenon. My point is to say if we're in here in what's supposed to be the safe zone, in other words, we are not hurling slurs at marginalized groups, we're not hurling insults at people with disabilities, but rather we're engaged in the normal course of dialogue, and we're stuck with the task of explaining that something someone said or did, or a person overall, is just not very intelligent. My point is, there's no nice way to do that. And I don't have to use the R word as evidence of that. I can say, you're not very smart, or that wasn't very intelligent. That was a dumb thing to do. That was a low IQ move. That you just did was not indicative of having a very high right. There's just I could try to soft pedal it any way I want to. At the end of the day, what the person hears is, you're dumb, or the thing you just did is dumb. Okay. And at some point, you just got to accept that. And I think it's the same thing with religion. I'm sorry, but there's just no nice way to tell a person they have been lied to their entire life. That this thing that they have made their entire personality, that they've probably been given money to, that they've been proselytizing to everybody in their world to, they probably redecorated their whole house. You know, they got their Jesus necklace on all the time. They only listen to gospel music as they're riding around in their car. Like, yes, they are living in that Jesus snow globe bubble, and there is no nice way to burst it, but burst it shall. Okay. And so to me, we just have to just start with the courage of our conviction. Hey, I'm really, really sorry to tell you this, but I care about you enough. That's a great way to do it. You know, the great way to do it, y'all, is to be as kind and considerate as you can reasonably be. And I think that starts with something like, hey, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but I do really care about you, and I think you should know the truth. You know, this religion just isn't true. You know, I know it's really important to you, and I'm really sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I just don't think there's any good evidence or even logical reason to believe these things. Now, I'm not expecting them to change or expecting that conversation to necessarily go well. That's another thing I think that we need to do, is we need to adjust our expectations. This isn't going to be a pleasant conversation. There may not be a tactic or strategy that we've identified that, number one, can make this a comfortable conversation, or number two, can be guaranteed to be effective. Sometimes you just have to accept, this might be the best I can do. And, this is a conversation that needs to be had. I'm not necessarily expecting it to go well. And we have those moments in our lives. We have those moments with people we work with. We have those moments with students. We have those moments with our significant others, right? Hey, it's going to be tough, but I got to let them know what's going on. They're not going to be happy about it. They might be upset for a while, but we'll get through it like we get through everything else. So that's just my take on it. And yeah, my kind of closing thoughts on a lot of this is, it is a tragic occurrence. I think it's telling us a lot about ourselves. It's a very interesting mirror that's been held up to society in this moment. But yeah, my takeaway from a lot of this is, he just shouldn't have been there to begin with. And a huge part of this problem that we're not talking about, because again, I don't want to say that I disagree or every other take is wrong, but you host a show because you think you have something unique to say, or you want to try to come at it from an angle you're not seeing reflected elsewhere. And so for me, I'm not saying that what everybody else says is wrong. Oh, he shouldn't be here because we don't solve our problems that way. All of those things. People they're right. But for me, he shouldn't have been there, because we need to re-examine what the educational contract is, especially at public universities. And for me, this type of dialogue and this type of organization does not need to be on our campuses. And again, just to be clear, that is not canceling, that is not cancel culture, that is not any of that. What I'm saying is Turning Point USA didn't need it. They already had incredible, social media presence, incredible influence. These are some of the most powerful people in the political media and organization landscape. Direct line to the president, right? Huge Turning Point USA conferences literally rivaled CPAC. A lot of y'all probably didn't even know if there was a difference between you, like Turning Point, CPAC. Like you probably are just now realizing, oh, Turning Point USA was Charlie Kirk's thing, and CPAC is the actual Republican Party. But that's how successful and integrated into the political ecosystem of the right Turning Point USA was. And again, saying you cannot come to our campus is not saying you cannot come to our town. If you want to, for me, if I'm the university people, look, you got every right in the world to go across the street from the university and, get a permit from the town to have an event at a venue in town, or an outdoor whatever you want to do. But my thing is,
Excuse me.
educational institutions have a legal, a university policy, and like I said, even more important, an ethical and moral obligation to protect the interest of its students, that hate speech does not belong on campus. And hate speech is not part of a necessary dialogue. It is not part of the discourse, and it is not a part of students' education. And so I do not think those type of organizations and events should be held on campus. I'm not saying that they can't have them somewhere else. I'm just saying they don't belong on a university's campus.
Mhm.
And yeah, what are your closing thoughts?
I can agree with it's the university isn't the place for that. Um, for me, my experience at university was learning new concepts and how to think about those new concepts. They were trying to help me establish a career field, right? Where I could thrive. We're going to prepare you for that. Here's the education you requested. Here's the information. Study hard. We're going to test you on it so you know what your strengths and weaknesses are. And we'll help build up those strengths and eliminate your weaknesses. As long as I was committed, that's what was going to happen. Um, these days, I do, and AI is a perfect example of this. I think people want to do less thinking for themselves. People like Rush Limbaugh influence that. People like Jesus of Nazareth, if he existed, the character of Jesus of Nazareth influenced that. You have books and things that are influencing that, not the process of consideration of the facts that are presented to you or how to go attain facts, obtain facts. But I think society is getting lazier. American society is getting lazier. And we just want our anger assigned to us. We just want our opinions assigned to us so we can go off and have something to do and sound semi-intelligent when we're presenting material. And and yet have none of the right insight to back it up. Not consider what are the ramifications of this. Not consider, is this something that deserves my attention or deserves my support? Or is what I just listened to completely wrong and I ought not be caught defending it, right? I have to stand up against this ideology, which is destructive in whatever capacity I have. If it's just replying to people on social media, if that's all you can do it. Do it. And if someone can prove you wrong, you have to be willing to consider, okay, now what should I do instead of doubling down? Because a lot of people just want to double down, no matter how much ground they lose. They just keep on throwing in, you know.
Yeah, and let me just say this quick because I'd be remiss if I didn't, which is, this is always how the politics of power and oppression have played out, okay? And what that has always been is the oppressor will always use violence, force, the state, whatever means they have available to them. But the opposition is always supposed to stick to words and peaceful petitioning that can then be safely regarded and ignored. And, even when you really look at something like the Second Amendment, that was really about slave owners being able to arm white militias so that they could quell slave rebellions, right? And so even then, it was never supposed to be everybody has the right to have weapons so that they can protect themselves from the government. That's not really what that was about. So part of this conversation then has to be what this is really an instance of, which is that powerful class can be touched. They can be got at, whether that's the calls coming from inside the house and it's one of their own who has decided they're no longer, they failed a conservative purity test, ironically, or whether it comes from the other side who has just said, you have poked at me for the last time. And so to me, the lesson that I would want people to take away, and the lesson I'd want my students to take away, and it's not a right, wrong, or indifferent thing, it's just the reality, which is there are dialogues that are, at the end of the day, about life and death for people.
Mm-hmm.
And there are consequences, again, right, wrong, or indifferent, for not engaging in those dialogues sincerely. And for people who do not have power, their concerns can only fall on deaf ears for so long. And that's a problem. And then on the flip side, people that are used, right? Because you can see it happening either way, right? And we see it happen both ways. So that's just something that really needs to be brought up in this, because the mistake that so many people have made is to pretend that this was like a conversation being cut short, right? That Charlie Kirk was really engaged in this grand dialogue with people, and he's going back and forth with everyone, and he's influencing them, and they're influencing him, and now this tragedy has cut him down short of us seeing where he landed. And I'm like, I don't think that's what was happening. I think he was committed to not changing. He was committed to being who he was. He was committed to the harmful things that he was doing. And that is not something we want to encourage other people to do, or to tell people that that is how our discourse should take place. To your point, our discourse should be something you sincerely engaging, something you show up with your reasons, you show up with your evidence, and you show up to influence others, and also recognize your need to be able to be influenced. And again, sort of to AR's point about facts favoring the left, genuine discourse and dialogue favor the left for the same reasons. And so we are able to show up and keep bigotry off the table. We are able to show up with reasons. We are able to show up with facts and evidence. And we are willing to show up and able to show up being willing to be influenced. We are able to show up and say, hey, if you can show me I'm wrong, you can change my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side, because the facts aren't on their side and the facts don't favor them and reason doesn't favor them, they tend to not be able to show up with that same openness, with that same reason and evidence, and certainly not with the same ability to be open-minded. And so largely for them, showing up at these things is a performance. And I've also seen that missing from the commentary. The reason, Drew did talk about this. If you go back to Genetically Modified Skeptics video where he's talking about why he no longer wants to debate people on the far right, and he says the debates aren't helping. Part of what he's very keen to finally have called out is that's why they want to have the debates. There's a reason that they're so happy to debate the other side. There's a reason they love debating atheists. There's a reason they love debating liberals. There's a reason they love debating progressive, because it allows them to continue to do what they're doing, which is really moving in power, moving in moving in their sphere of influence with complete disregard to the consequences for other people, while at the same time making it look as though, why can't you just convince them? Why can't you just make an argument? I came here to talk to you. I came to have civil discourse. And so there's a way in which when people say, oh, Charlie was just engaged in the dialogue, Charlie was just engaged in the discourse, he was just helping us have the conversation, you're literally doing the oppressor's work for them, pretending that that's what was really happening. So yeah, there's a lot there, y'all. There's a lot there, but I just wanted to mention that because that's a huge part of this. Is we got to stop pretending that people in power are really about to change if we can just have conversations with them more effectively. That's never been true, y'all. Never.
Pocket Locker, do you know what the question, if there was a question, that Charlie Kirk was answering when he was unalive?
Yeah, I think the first question was if he knew how many trans mass shooters there have been. And then Charlie asked, said whatever he said. I don't remember exactly what his response was. So then the person asked a question like, do you know how many mass shooters there's been overall? Oh, he said like far too many or something like that. Yeah, so he said like far too many or something. So then they were like, do you know how many mass shooters there's been overall? And then he said something like, is this including gang violence? So basically his last two dying utterances, one was throwing trans people under the bus and the other was throwing black people under the bus. Another reason,
Well, they're white
I'm
gangs
not
too. They're
exactly
Latino
mournful.
gangs too.
Huh?
The reason I ask is because the school shooting took place within minutes of his shooting. And I do wonder if if there were people who were trying to send a message to show almost what we see, right? Here's an activist, if you want to call him that, on the right, who openly promotes people having weapons and not putting controls in place so that fewer people will have the most destructive of, you know, handguns. And his death overshadows the death of little kids
Yeah,
because these things occurred as effectively the same time.
right.
If this wasn't somebody's plan, are the two
Again,
killers
people more concerned about
associated
his
with each
kids
other?
seeing him get shot than children actually being shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Maya, I agree with you about Drew. If you check out, I made a couple streams about recent videos he's made. So I largely agree with your take on Drew. But he did mention the thing about the right always being willing to engage in dialogue because that's their MO. And for people to not make that connection with the Charlie Kirk situation is terrible because then what they're doing is they're sane washing what Charlie Kirk was doing and making the situation worse by pretending we all need to be engaged with dialogue with people like this rather than realizing that they never showed up to the dialogue to begin with. It was never a conversation, it was never a debate, it was never a discourse. That's a thing they do to perform civility, that way they can, give you oppression service with a smile, basically. So, that's it. Because again, I'm really pissed that universities have trafficked so heavily in this sort of both sides debate culture, rather than just taking a firm stance that sorry, what the ideas that those guys try to present are beyond the scope of what we consider to be something of educational value, and therefore it has no place on our campus. Yeah. He sided with the ACA over trans rights back in 2018. He's always been a biased hack, and I never respected him. I hear that. Well, and we'll see. Especially now that we've got this news that the alleged assailants, you know, lived with or potentially was engaged in a romantic relationship with a trans person. That's actually what kind of delayed us today. Was trying to get a feel for what is going on with that story. But yeah, I think things are about to hit the fan. And again, we're gonna have more people showing us who they really are, now that we're getting this news and we see how all of this plays out. But yeah, I think unfortunately it looks like they have found the detail they were looking for to run with, and unfortunately, I think it's going to also mean a lot of liberals, a lot of leftists, a lot of atheists, a lot of people like that are unfortunately going to be uh, taking the bait, taking the bait. So we'll see what happens. But look, let's get up out of here. I know my one black friend is we're both exhausted, and I got a lot to do to get ready for tomorrow. But look, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it.
you.
Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to the mods. If you're watching later, please do get in the comments. Let us know what you think. Please, if nothing else, answer the question of the day. Do you guys think that universities should still be having events like this? I don't, but let us know what y'all think in the comments. And of course, like the video, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. We appreciate it. And as always, be good to yourselves
And each other.
All right. We'll see you next time, gang. Join us in the headquarters. There's a link here in the chat and the description. All right. We'll see you next time.